I should have known better than to take that shortcut through Blackwood Forest. The locals had warned me, not directly, of course. No one ever comes right out and says things like that in small towns. It's always in the sideways glances, the sudden silence when you mention certain places, the way conversations drift to other topics. But I was tired, my GPS had died, and that narrow dirt path looked like it would shave a good 30 minutes off my journey back to the motel. The sun was already sinking below the tree line when I turned off the main road. My headlights swept across the dense forest as I navigated the rough terrain. My sedan clearly not built for this kind of drive. The rhythmic crunch of tires over fallen branches and the occasional scrape of underbrush against the car door were the only sounds breaking the unnerving silence. About 10 minutes in, my radio began to sputter. Static crackled through whatever late-night talk show had been keeping me company, the host's voice warping and stretching until it dissolved completely into white noise. I switched it off with an irritated jab. The silence that followed seemed to press against the windows of my car, thick and expectant. That's when I first noticed the light. It was distant at first, a faint, golden glow bobbing between the trees, maybe 50 yards ahead. My first thought was that it must be another hiker or a local hunter with a lantern. But something about its movement seemed unnatural. It didn't swing like a lantern carried by someone walking. Instead, it hovered, almost as if suspended in midair, moving with deliberate slowness through the forest. I slowed my car to a crawl, squinting through the windshield. The light paused, as if sensing my attention, then began to drift closer to the road. As it approached, I realized it wasn't a flashlight or lantern at all. The glow seemed to emanate from within, like a translucent orb of pale yellow light about the size of a basketball. "Hello," I called out stupidly, my window halfway down before I even realized I'd lowered it. My voice sounded small and hollow in the vastness of the forest. "Is someone there?" The light stopped moving. For several long seconds it simply hovered at the edge of the tree line, perhaps 20 feet from my car. Then slowly it began to change shape. The orb stretched vertically, elongating into something vaguely humanoid. I could make out what looked like a head, torso, and limbs, all formed from that same ethereal light. My skin prickled with goosebumps as a sudden chill pervaded the car. My breath fogged in front of my face, despite the fact that it was a mild September evening. The figure raised what I can only describe as an arm and beckoned to me with long, spindly fingers. That's when I heard the whispers. They didn't come through my ears, at least that's not how it felt. Instead, they seemed to materialize directly inside my mind, a chorus of hushed, urgent voices overlapping each other. "Come walk with us. We've been waiting so long, so very long." My hand moved toward the door handle of its own accord. Some distant part of my brain screamed in protest, but it was as if I was watching myself from far away. The whispers grew louder, more insistent. "We're so cold, so alone. Join us and never be alone again." The door clicked open. The night air rushed in, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and something else, something sickly sweet like overripe fruit on the verge of rotting. My foot touched the ground outside. A sharp crack split the air, a branch breaking somewhere in the darkness behind me. The sound snapped me back to myself like a rubber band. I yanked my leg back into the car and slammed the door shut, my heart hammering against my ribs. The glowing figure seemed to flicker with what I could only interpret as frustration. It drifted closer to the road, its form becoming more defined. I could now make out the suggestion of a face, hollow eyes that seemed to burn more intensely than the rest of its luminous body, and a mouth stretched into a wide, unnatural grin. I slammed the car into reverse, tires spinning against the dirt road. The figure lunged forward with impossible speed, its arms stretching toward my vehicle. The temperature inside the car plummeted so rapidly that frost began to form on the inside of my windshield. As I accelerated backward, the figure kept pace, gliding above the road. Through the rapidly frosting glass, I saw more lights emerging from between the trees. 3, then 7, then dozens, all taking on the same elongated humanoid shape. They moved with eerie synchronicity, converging on my car from all directions. I spun the wheel hard, executing a clumsy 3-point turn, and floored the accelerator. The engine roared in protest as I sped back the way I had come. In my rearview mirror, I could see the swarm of lights pursuing me, their movements fluid and relentless. The main road appeared ahead, blessed asphalt and the promise of civilization. As I skidded onto it, I risked one final glance back. The figures had stopped at the forest's edge, their luminous forms pulsing with what seemed like anger or disappointment. All except for one, the first one I'd seen, which hovered in the middle of the dirt road. As I watched, it raised a hand in what almost seemed like a goodbye wave. The whispers came once more, fainter now, but unmistakable. "We'll be waiting when you return." Everyone returns to us eventually. I drove straight through the night, stopping only when I was 3 counties away. I told myself it had been some kind of hallucination brought on by exhaustion, maybe swamp gas or some atmospheric phenomenon I couldn't explain. Anything but what it had appeared to be. 3 days later, I found myself standing at the entrance to that same dirt road through Blackwood Forest, with no memory of how I'd gotten there. My car keys were in my hand, and my feet were caked with mud, as if I'd been walking through the woods for hours. In the distance, just beyond the first bend in the road, I could see a faint golden glow beginning to take shape. They're calling me back now. Every night I find myself a little closer to the forest. Sometimes I wake up halfway there, standing in my yard in my pajamas, or sitting in my car at a rest stop 30 miles from home. The whispers never truly leave. They're always there in the background of my thoughts, patient and persistent. I know what the locals call them now, the lantern men. They're said to be the spirits of those who died lost in the forest, forever seeking companions in their eternal wandering. Some say they were once travelers like me who took that same shortcut and never found their way out. Tonight, I've locked all my doors and windows. I've swallowed enough sleeping pills to ensure I won't be going anywhere. But even as I write this, I can see it, a faint golden glow just outside my bedroom window, beckoning. And deep down, I know that eventually I'll answer its call. If you've enjoyed this journey into terror, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more chilling tales. Leave a comment below about your own encounters with strange lights in the darkness. I'd love to hear your stories. I've never told anyone about what happened after I found that old vinyl record in my grandfather's basement. Not my wife, not my therapist, not a single soul. But I need to get this out now, before it's too late, before the music comes back again. My grandfather passed away 3 months ago, leaving me his farmhouse on the outskirts of Millfield. It was a somber inheritance. I'd spent many summers there as a child, running through cornfields and fishing in the nearby creek. Now it was mine to sort through and eventually sell, as my life was firmly established 2 states away. The basement had always been off limits when I was young. "Nothing down there but old junk and black widow spiders," Grandpa would say, ruffling my hair whenever I asked about the padlocked door. When I finally cut through that rusty lock last month, I expected dust, cobwebs, and perhaps some forgotten furniture. What I found instead was a meticulously organized archive. Shelves lined the walls, filled with hundreds, perhaps thousands of vinyl records, each in pristine protective sleeves. In the center of the room stood an antique record player, its wood polished to a gleam that seemed impossible in the musty basement. A small desk beside it held a leather-bound journal filled with my grandfather's precise handwriting, detailed notes about each record in his collection. I spent hours down there that first day, flipping through the journal, admiring his collection. Jazz, blues, classical, even early rock and roll. Grandpa had eclectic taste I'd never known about. As evening approached, I selected a record at random, Ella Fitzgerald, one of the few artists I recognized, and placed it on the turntable. The music that filled the basement was crisp and warm, as if the record had been pressed yesterday rather than decades ago. I closed my eyes, letting the sound wash over me, imagining my grandfather doing the same in this very spot over the years. That's when I noticed the record sleeve I hadn't returned to its place. It had fallen behind the desk, revealing another sleeve hidden behind it. Unlike the others, this one had no label, no artwork, just a plain black sleeve that seemed to absorb the light around it. I picked it up, surprised by how cold it felt to the touch. Inside was a record unlike any I'd seen before. It wasn't black, but a deep, swirling crimson that seemed to move under the surface like liquid. No label, no indication of the artist or songs, just that strange, mesmerizing red vinyl. I should have put it back. Something about it felt wrong, but curiosity got the better of me. I carefully lifted the Ella Fitzgerald record from the turntable and replaced it with the mysterious crimson one. For several seconds there was nothing but the soft hiss of needle on vinyl. Then it began. The sound was barely audible at first, a low, rhythmic pulse that I felt more than heard, like a heartbeat traveling up through the floorboards into my feet. Gradually, other sounds layered over it, the whisper of wind through dead leaves, the distant toll of what might have been church bells, and beneath it all, something that could have been breathing or distant laughter. I stood transfixed, unable to move as the sounds organized themselves into what I can only describe as music, though unlike any I'd ever heard. There were no instruments I could identify, no vocals in any language I recognized, yet it was unmistakably a composition, complex, intentional, and deeply unsettling. The temperature in the basement seemed to drop with each passing minute. My breath clouded in front of me, though it was mid-July. The single light bulb hanging from the ceiling began to swing gently, casting moving shadows across the walls. And still, I couldn't bring myself to lift the needle. The melody, if you could call it that, became more intricate, more insistent. It seemed to find resonance within my own body, my heartbeat adjusting to match its rhythm. I felt dizzy, my vision blurring at the edges. Then came the voices. They emerged from the background noise so gradually that I didn't immediately recognize them as human. Whispers at first, too faint to make out words. They grew in volume and clarity until I could distinguish phrases in a language I didn't know but somehow understood. "Come down to us. Open the way. We are waiting just beneath." My hands began to move of their own accord, fingers tracing patterns in the air that left faint luminous trails in my vision. My lips formed words I didn't recognize, my voice joining the chorus, emanating from the record. The floor beneath my feet no longer felt solid. Looking down, I saw the concrete appearing to ripple like the surface of a pond, dark shapes moving beneath it. The sensation of falling washed over me, though I remained standing. With tremendous effort, I tore my gaze away from the floor and focused on the record player. The crimson vinyl had begun to spin faster than it should have been able to, the red seeming to leak out from its edges like blood. I lunged forward and yanked the needle off the record. The silence that followed was absolute, pressing against my eardrums like a physical force. I stood there trembling for what felt like hours but must have been only minutes until the normal sounds of the house, the hum of the refrigerator upstairs, the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway, gradually returned. I fled the basement, slamming the door behind me. That night, I dreamt of vast underground chambers where pale figures danced to that same terrible music, their movements too fluid to be human, their faces turned expectantly toward the ceiling, toward me. The next morning, I convinced myself it had been nothing more than an exhaustion-induced hallucination. I'd been working too hard, clearing out the house, not sleeping well, grieving my grandfather. My mind had played tricks on me. Nevertheless, I avoided the basement for 3 days. When I finally worked up the courage to return, I had one purpose: to get rid of that record. I brought a hammer with me, intending to shatter the vinyl into pieces too small to ever be played again. The record wasn't there. I searched the entire basement, growing increasingly frantic as the hours passed. I checked every sleeve, looked behind furniture, even pried up floorboards where they felt loose. Nothing. The crimson record had vanished. What I did find, tucked into the back of my grandfather's journal, was a yellowed newspaper clipping from 1957. The headline read, "Local man missing, strange sounds reported." The article detailed the disappearance of a local music collector named Thomas Whelan, last seen purchasing unusual foreign records at an estate sale. Neighbors reported hearing unearthly music from his home the night he vanished. Below the article, in my grandfather's handwriting, "Found in T.W.'s collection. Never play, destroy if possible." I sold the house the following week, leaving everything in the basement untouched. I told myself I was finally moving on, that the property held too many memories. The truth is, I couldn't bear to be there any longer. But here's the thing, I still hear it sometimes. That music. In the moments between wakefulness and sleep, or when I'm alone in a quiet room. Faint but unmistakable, growing clearer each time. And sometimes when I look down at wooden floors or concrete sidewalks, they don't seem quite solid anymore. They ripple ever so slightly, like something is moving beneath them, waiting. Last night I woke to find myself standing barefoot in my backyard, staring at the ground, my hands tracing those same strange patterns in the air. I was humming that melody, the one from the record. The soil beneath my feet had begun to soften and sink. I think they're coming for me now. Whatever found Thomas Whelan in 1957, whatever my grandfather tried to warn against. I hear the music even now as I write this, growing louder by the minute. The floor of my study seems less like floor and more like membrane with each passing moment. If you find yourself in possession of a strange crimson record, I beg you, don't play it. Don't even touch it, because once you hear that music, it never truly stops. It just waits, patient and hungry, for the moment you let your guard down. And I'm so very, very tired of fighting it. If you enjoyed getting scared out of your wits, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more terrifying tales. Drop a comment below about your own strange encounters with mysterious music or sounds. I read them all, at least while I still can. The Elk Creek Trail had always been popular with hikers in our part of Oregon. 3 miles of relatively easy terrain through old-growth forest, ending at a modest but picturesque waterfall, perfect for families and casual weekend warriors. I'd walked it dozens of times myself, every season of the year. That's why the Forest Service called me when hikers started going missing. 3 disappearances in 2 months. No bodies found, no signs of animal attacks, no evidence of foul play, just people who walked into those woods and never walked out. The trail was officially closed pending investigation, but as the local search and rescue coordinator, with 15 years of experience, I was granted access to conduct my own assessment. I arrived at the trailhead at dawn, the parking lot empty save for my truck. A light mist hung between the towering Douglas firs, muffling sound and limiting visibility to about 30 yards. Standard conditions for an October morning in the Pacific Northwest. I logged my entry time with the ranger station via radio, strapped on my pack, and began my hike. The first mile offered nothing unusual. Birds called from the canopy overhead, An occasional rustling in the underbrush suggested the normal activity of squirrels and other small wildlife. The trail itself was well maintained. No unusual erosion, no fallen trees, nothing that might cause a hiker to stray from the marked path. The second mile brought the first anomaly. The mist grew denser, which wasn't particularly strange, but the temperature dropped noticeably. My breath fogged in front of me, and a chill crept beneath my layers of Gore-Tex and fleece. October in Oregon is cool, but this felt more like December. Then I heard the whistling. It was distant at first. A simple four-note melody repeated with precision. Up, down, down, up. It echoed among the trees, making it impossible to pinpoint the source. I called out, thinking it might be another hiker or perhaps a ranger, but my voice seemed swallowed by the mist. The whistling continued, unchanged. I pressed on, the trail beginning its gradual ascent toward the waterfall. The whistling grew neither louder nor fainter as I walked, maintaining its distance regardless of my movement. The consistent volume, despite my changing position, struck me as decidedly unnatural. Still, I continued, driven by professional obligation and, I admit, growing curiosity. Halfway through the third mile, the trail condition deteriorated rapidly. What had been a clear path now appeared untended for months, perhaps years. Fallen branches crossed the trail, underbrush encroached from the sides, and the trail markers became difficult to spot in the thickening fog. I checked my GPS. According to the device, I was still on the Elk Creek Trail, though what lay before me looked nothing like the path I knew. More troubling, the GPS showed I'd traveled just over 2 miles from the trailhead, when by my estimation and experience, I should have covered nearly 3. The whistling changed. Still the same 4 notes, but slower now, more deliberate. Up, down, down, up. Each note hung in the air longer than should have been possible with a human breath. The spaces between notes stretched uncomfortably, creating a tension that tightened something in my chest. I reached for my radio to check in with the ranger station, but received only static in return. Cell service, as expected, was non-existent. I was completely alone with that whistling, which now seemed to come from multiple directions at once. A rational part of my mind suggested turning back. 3 missing hikers was already too many, and something was clearly wrong on this trail. But 15 years of search and rescue work hardens you to certain fears and amplifies your sense of duty. People had vanished here. Perhaps they'd encountered what I was experiencing now. I needed to understand. The trail ahead split unexpectedly, something not shown on any map of Elk Creek. Both paths looked equally unused, disappearing into thick fog about 20 yards ahead. As I stood contemplating my options, the whistling stopped. The silence that followed was absolute. No birds, no insects, no distant rush of the waterfall that should have been audible by now. Nothing but my own breathing and the soft thud of my heartbeat in my ears. Then, from the left fork of the trail, came a voice. "Hello? Is someone there? I need help." A woman's voice, trembling with what might have been cold or fear. One of the missing hikers. It seemed impossible. The most recent disappearance had been 3 weeks ago, but I couldn't ignore it. "This is search and rescue," I called back. "Stay where you are. I'm coming to you." I started down the left fork, moving quickly but cautiously. The fog seemed to part just enough to let me see a few yards ahead, then close behind me like a curtain. The trail beneath my feet felt wrong, softer than it should be, as if I were walking on moss rather than packed earth. "Please hurry," the voice called again, closer now. "I don't know how much longer I can—" The words cut off abruptly. I broke into a jog, rounding a bend in the trail to find nothing. No sign of the woman, no footprints, no disturbed vegetation. Just more trail stretching into more fog. The whistling resumed, now from directly behind me. I spun around to find the trail I'd just traversed was gone, replaced by a solid wall of towering ferns unlike any native to Oregon. They swayed gently despite the absence of wind. Panic gripped me for the first time. I fumbled for my GPS, but the screen showed only static. My compass spun wildly, settling on no consistent direction. Even the position of the sun was impossible to determine through the thick canopy and impenetrable fog. I pressed forward, having no better option. The trail now sloped steeply downward, though Elk Creek's elevation profile should have been continuing upward toward the falls. The air grew noticeably damper, carrying the scent of decay and stagnant water. The whistling followed, always just behind me, the tempo increasing with my pace. 4 notes over and over, up, down, up, faster now, more insistent. I reached a clearing I'd never seen before. In its center stood an impossible structure, a small cabin built of rough-hewn logs, its construction appearing both ancient and somehow unfinished. No windows pierced its walls. A single door stood slightly ajar, darkness yawning beyond it. The whistling stopped again. From within the cabin came a chorus of voices, overlapping yet distinct. Men, women, even what sounded like children, all calling out in tones of distress and confusion. "Hello, is someone there? I can't find the trail. Please help me, I'm lost." Among them, I recognized the descriptions of the 3 missing hikers: a college student, a middle-aged father of 2, and a retired schoolteacher. Their voices rose above the others, more desperate, more aware. "It tricked me," the schoolteacher's voice said clearly. "It used my grandson's voice. Don't listen to it." The chorus of voices abruptly ceased, replaced by a single sound, the whistling now emanating from within the cabin. Up, down, up, a simple invitation. My feet moved toward the cabin without conscious command. Something was drawing me forward, an inexorable pull like gravity. 3 steps from the door, I managed to stop, fighting against the compulsion with everything I had. The door swung wider. Standing in the doorway was myself. Not as I am now, but as I might be after months or years in these woods. Gaunt, pale, eyes sunken but gleaming with an unnatural light. My doppelganger's lips were pursed in that endless whistling, though the sound now seemed to come from everywhere at once. It extended a hand toward me, fingers unnaturally long and jointed, nails grown into yellowed claws. Behind it, in the darkness of the cabin, I glimpsed movement, many figures, their outlines human, but their movements wrong, jerky and synchronized like puppets on shared strings. With tremendous effort, I took 1 step backward. The thing wearing my face tilted its head at an impossible angle, its whistling faltering for the first time. I took another step back. Its expression changed to one of hunger, then rage. It lunged forward, crossing the threshold of the cabin, something I realized in that moment of clarity it had been unable to do until I came so close. Its movements were spider-like, too many joints bending in too many directions. I ran. Blind panic gave me speed I didn't know I possessed. I crashed through undergrowth, no longer caring about direction, only distance. Behind me, the whistling rose to a shriek that sounded like a dozen flutes played by someone who had never heard music. I ran until my lungs burned, until my legs threatened to buckle. When I finally stopped, gasping for air, I found myself at the Elk Creek trailhead parking lot. My truck stood exactly where I'd left it. According to my watch, only 2 hours had passed since I'd started my hike. The Forest Service ordered Elk Creek Trail permanently closed the next day. They cited environmental concerns, unstable ground conditions, bureaucratic language to mask the truth. I quit search and rescue the following week. I couldn't risk leading others into danger, not when I barely understood it myself. That was 3 months ago. I've tried to move on, to forget what happened in those woods. But at night, when the house is quiet, I sometimes catch myself whistling. 4 simple notes. Up, down, up. And lately, I've noticed, sometimes it's not me whistling at all. The mirrors in my house show a gaunt face with sunken eyes, though my friends tell me I look fine. Yesterday I found mud from the trail on my boots, though I haven't been near Elk Creek since that day. And sometimes, in the darkness just before dawn, I hear voices calling from my basement, confused, afraid, begging for help. I think I'm becoming a trail of my own now, a path for something to enter this world. And there's no one left to search for me, no one to mount a rescue. If you've made it through this tale of terror, make sure to drop a like on this video and subscribe for more nightmare fuel. Leave a comment below about any strange trails you've encountered. Just be careful where they might lead you.